Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about 19th century ideologies, focusing specifically on liberalism, socialism, and nationalism. Here are your goals. Alright, so let's begin by talking about why these new ideologies come into existence around the year 1800. Basically, the reason for these new ideas is that there's a new political and economic situation, and that the lives of people in Europe and America, the places where industrialization and modernization are going on the fastest, leads them to look for new ways of living. Specifically, political changes caused by the American and French revolutions and economic changes caused by the Industrial Revolution lead people to look for new ways to understand their world. And so basically, when your world has changed, you need new ideas to explain the new situation. And that's where these new ideologies come from. The three new ideologies that we're going to be focusing on are liberalism, socialism, and nationalism. These three ideas come into play around the year 1800 and basically never go away after this. If you look around in today's world, you'll still see the ideas of liberalism, socialism, and nationalism swirling around in the society that we live in today. I've come up with like a little slogan for each of these ideas to help you get the basic idea. So the basic idea for liberalism is that individual freedom equals happiness, not just for individuals, but for everybody. Socialism's idea is basically that happiness should be for everybody, not just for the rich. And nationalism's idea is that is basically one people, one nation. And we'll go into what that means more in a little bit. Begin by looking at liberalism in a little bit more detail. So the basic idea with liberalism, to expand on the slogan just a little bit, is the idea that by protecting the freedom of individuals, we can create a society that is wealthy, harmonious, and just. So basically, individual freedom leads to happiness. If you let individuals do what they want, things will turn out the best, not just for them, but for everybody. The origin of liberalism comes from Enlightenment ideas. So if you look at a lot of Enlightenment ideas, you'll see liberalism there kind of waiting to burst out. And so we can see this in John Locke's ideas, especially in his idea of a limited representative government. Basically, the idea was that the government was formed by the people in order to preserve the freedom of the people. So the purpose of government is protecting individual freedom. We can also see liberal ideas applied to economics in Adam Smith, who is kind of the father of free market economics. Adam Smith's idea is basically that if you leave people alone to pursue wealth, there will be more stuff to go around for everybody, and thus everybody will be better off. Both of these ideas are centered around the idea of protecting the freedom of the individuals, and they believe that individual freedom is important because it will result in more happiness, that is, more stuff, and more harmony in society for everybody. And so liberalism doesn't catch on everywhere, but it does catch on big time in America and Great Britain. On top of this, it also catches on among the European bourgeoisie, so the rich factory owners and like well-educated people in France, Germany, Austria, and Russia. But there are some big problems that liberalism faces. And perhaps the biggest problem that liberalism faces is that as the Industrial Revolution is going on and cities get big and smelly and dirty and the working classes begin to suffer, liberals don't have any really good answer to how to fix all of this. Basically, they just say, well, we should just continue to let the free market work, we should continue to protect individual freedom, keep government small, and these problems will probably fix themselves in time. So a lot of liberals were happy with this logic, they were okay with that, but a lot of other people were not happy with it, and so this led to some other competing ideologies. Importantly, among these competing ideologies was socialism. happiness for all, not just the rich. So the basic idea in socialism is that there needs to be a fundamental reorganization of society in order to create a just social order, where everybody, not just the rich, can enjoy the benefits of industrialization. So the origin of socialism was basically a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. So people began to see all of the terrible suffering that the workers in industrial cities were facing, and they started to say, liberalism, free market economics, and limited government has led to this. Liberalism has led to this terrible inequality, to all this pollution, all this suffering. So we need to do something to change this. We need to do something to make our society a better place. And socialism and what socialists have in common ends. Everybody agrees that something needs to change, but how exactly that change is going to happen and what that change is going to look like varies radically depending on which kind of socialist you talk to. And there are three big kinds of socialism: Utopian Socialism, Revolutionary Socialism, and Reform Socialism. So Utopian Socialism is the earliest kind of socialism, and its strategy is basically just to come up with new ideas and wait for them to catch on. Like, if we just come up with the best idea, everybody will recognize that it's awesome, and change will follow accordingly. Not surprisingly, this usually doesn't go anywhere. The next, and perhaps the most historically explosive form of socialism, was revolutionary socialism, and this is also known as Marxism. And the basic idea here was that the lower classes, basically the people who are not getting a fair share in the industrial societies, should organize in order to overthrow the rich rulers and create a new fair society. Exactly what this fair society will look like, Marx never really went into detail, but that didn't stop revolutionary socialism from catching on and becoming an incredibly important historical movement. And then finally we have Reform Socialism, which is kind of a less explosive force, but that has perhaps gone on to have more impact in many societies than Revolutionary Socialism. And the basic idea in Reform Socialism is that you're going to use democracy to gradually reform society. That is, to make society better for the working people, to kind of level the social pyramid a little bit so that life is better for people at the bottom. So the main problem for socialists is practical stuff. So all socialists can agree that the current system is unfair. Even a lot of people can just look around and see that the Industrial Revolution was causing a lot of problems. But exactly how to fix these problems and exactly what the new society would look like, there was very little agreement among socialists on exactly what that new society would look like. And this prevented socialism from organizing and having as much change as it could have had on society. And finally, we've got nationalism. One people, one nation. So the basic idea with nationalism is that differences in culture, language, and history divide the people of the world up into a number of natural communities known as nations, and each of these nations should be independent. That is, should be its own country. So basically they would say, all right, so the French people, they speak French, they have a different history, they should have their own country, we'll call it France. German people, they speak German, they have a different history, they should all have one big country, and we'll call it Germany. Italy, same thing. Poland, same thing. So basically, they want to divide the world up into a bunch of nations where people in the nations have a lot of stuff in common. So the origin of nationalism comes from changes in politics and communication. So changes in transportation and communication were important for nationalism because they connect common people up with a larger community. Before the Industrial Revolution, most farmers never really spent very much time away from their little farm. They couldn't read, so they really had no idea what was going on in the world around them. So they never really connected up with their larger community. An Italian farmer would have never really thought that he was part of this big thing called Italy. He would have just thought of himself as being part of his little village. But as trains come along and normal people can travel across large areas, and as new communication technologies like newspapers and telegraphs connect people up with the larger world, they start to see that they're part of these larger cultural units. Also, the Congress of Vienna that ends the French Revolution divides a lot of different cultural groups up into a few large oppressive states. For example, Austria, which gained power during the Congress of Vienna, was composed not just of Germans who lived in what is today Austria, but also was made up of Italians, Slavs, and Hungarians. And all of these different groups started to say, hey, why do we belong to Austria? We should belong to Italy, or we should belong to Hungary. So nationalism begins to catch on and to destabilize some of these old empires. So it catches on the most quickly and the strongest in Central Europe, in places like I just talked about. But it eventually spreads everywhere. Basically, every country you visit today thinks of itself as a nation, and they have national traditions, they have a flag, they have a national anthem. And so nationalism, and the way we're talking about it here, has caught on all over the world. But there are some problems with nationalism. One, it is never exactly clear who is and who is not part of the nation. And the reason for this is that nations essentially are imaginary. They exist in the imagination of the people of a certain region. So exactly who gets to be an American, for example, is not a clear concept. Like, do new immigrants get to be Americans, or do they have to wait a generation? Do their children become Americans? What exactly does it mean to be American? This is not a conceptually clear question. And this can lead to conflict, as some people try to become part of a nation and others try to keep people out of a nation. Another problem related to the first problem is that very few places in the world are culturally homogeneous. And what this means is that it can lead to conflict and persecution as cultural minorities in an area are picked on or kicked out in the name of the nation. And we see this in its most brutal form in the Holocaust, where nationalism catches on really hard in Germany, and it is expressed violently against a cultural minority in Germany, namely the Jews. But this happens a lot, not just in Germany, but cultural minorities face discrimination because of nationalism all the time. So this is a big problem with nationalism. Another thing you might add is nationalism doesn't really do anything to address the economic problems resulting from the Industrial Revolution. So some historians would see this as kind of a distraction from the really big issue of political and economic change. Your goals again? Thanks for hanging in there with me. These ideas are going to come up again and again, so you really need to get the basic idea of what liberalism, socialism, and nationalism are. That way, when we talk about it later in the year, you're not going to be confused by it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow.